Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Magnum Videos. If you recall, in the previous video I mentioned that I was going to tell you a fishing story in a future video. Well, this is the future video, so sit back and relax, and I'll be back right after this. Alright, this is the fishing story that I was going to tell you. Now, before I get started, I need to give you a little bit of what's called backstory, just to bring you up to speed on the situation and where everyone was at that time. So, let's go back to 1957. I was 8 years old. My mom and dad had just bought a brand new 3-bedroom home in Independence, Missouri, in Salisbury Hills at 111 Peck Drive. Now, Independence, if you're not familiar with that area, is about 10 miles south of Liberty, which is where we live right now. But back then, my dad loved to fish, and he took me with him on every fishing trip. He found a lake, a small lake, on a man's property up near Liberty, and he stopped one day and talked to the guy and said, "Would you mind if I come up here and fish sometime?" And the guy said, "No, that would be great, because the lake has a lot of fish in it and it needs to be fished in." So we fished up there a few times and caught some fish, and I have a couple of other fishing stories related to that lake. One of them involves 3 drunks that came out and had a really severe accident occur, and the other one involves a monkey. So now might be a good time to hit that subscribe button down there and click the little bell so you'll be notified when I upload those videos, if those are something that you might find interesting. Anyway, back to today's story. In 1959, we had lived there in our new house for about 2 years, and my dad went out and bought a 5-horsepower Sea King outboard motor, because on May the 30th of that year, Lake Jacomo opened. Now, Jacomo stands for Jackson County, Missouri. It was a big Corps of Engineers project, and about 970 acres of water. And we fished out there multiple times and caught a lot of fish. We usually arrived, well, let me back up a little bit before that. When I was 8 or 9 years old, or even 10 years old, if I knew that we were going fishing the next morning, I had a really hard time going to sleep, because it was so exciting and something that I loved to do so much with my dad. So the next morning, if the morning that we were going to go fishing, I would wake up to the aroma of bacon frying in the kitchen. I would get up and get dressed and go in there, and my dad was standing there at the stove turning strips of bacon over in a cast iron skillet. He had his silver Sunbeam percolator sitting there working away, and he was pouring himself a cup of coffee. And I sat down and ate, a few strips of bacon and some toast, and then he would take the rest of the bacon and make sandwiches out of it that we could take with us on the fishing trip. Back then we didn't have such a thing as sandwich bags, and he wrapped everything up in waxed paper, put it in a paper sack, and we loaded that into the truck along with the Sea King 5-horsepower motor, all of our fishing gear, the tackle box, everything we needed for the day. So we would leave the house. It was still dark outside, and head up into the little town of Independence on the city square there, and go to a place called Jerry's Bait and Tackle. Now we would usually wake Jerry up. There was a bell out in front, and we would ring that, and Jerry would come to the door all sleepy-eyed and let us in. And in fact, that's that's the location where my dad bought me my Johnson Century reel that I still have, and I do have a video about that if you'd like to see it sometime. I think if you just go to my channel and just Google or just search for Johnson Century reel, that'll probably get you there. Anyway, it still works just as good as it ever did. Anyway, we would buy some minnows in case it was crappie season. We would buy some general tackle, you know, some eagle claw hooks, some split shots, maybe some bobbers. My dad would buy some night crawlers or some red wigglers for bluegill because he liked to fish for bluegill. Anyway, we would leave there with all of our gear. Oh, I would always get a Coca-Cola. Jerry had a big machine there. It cost a nickel. You put a nickel in there, crank the little crank down, the glass bottle of Coke would come down, and you could open it right there. And we would leave there and head out to Lake Jacomo. And usually the sun was just about coming up when we arrived. We would park the truck right out in front of the marina and walk down the steps, and my dad would pay to rent a 14-foot aluminum fishing boat. He would put the motor on there, hook the gas tank to it. I would load up all the rods and reels and the tackle box, and within a few minutes we were heading out onto the water. We usually went down to the south end of the lake where the cliffs were, and we would either sit there on top of a brush pile where I would have to drop the anchor down and my dad would fish for bluegill, or sometimes we would go around the corner of those cliffs into a little cove. And that's where we were sitting on this particular day. We were on the south side of the cove, close to the mouth of the cove, and we were sitting there. It was a hot day. It was about noon or so, and we were just sitting there fishing, and all at once around the corner of the cove came this pontoon boat with a lot of noise. There were 2 men and 2 women on it. The women were wearing bathing suits, the men were in shorts with no shirts on, and music was playing, and they were just making a lot of noise. They were obviously pretty well intoxicated. At about the time they got to the center of the cove opening, this woman that's on the pontoon boat yells out, "I have had enough of this crap for the rest of my life." And she stands up, she has a fishing pole in her hands, and she throws that fishing pole over the railing of the pontoon boat. And the pontoon boat just continues puttering on down the main channel. Well, my dad is pretty much a relatively quiet guy, doesn't say a lot. He just sat there and watched that, as I did, and as soon as they went on a little ways further, he started reeling his line in. And he said, "Michael, hand me the tackle box." And the tackle box was on the floor of the boat, in the bottom of the boat, and I lifted it up and set it on the seat that was between us. He got his line reeled in, set his pole down, leaned it against the gunnel of the boat, opened the tackle box, and rummaged around in the bottom of it for a while, and emerged. His hand came out of there a little bit later with a brown paper sack that was kind of oily, and he opened it up and pulled out a big treble hook. I had never seen the treble hook before because we didn't fish for catfish. So he ties that treble hook on his line with a blood knot, of course, and puts a big weight on it, stands up in the boat, and by then the pontoon boat's long gone, and casts as far as he could toward the direction where that woman had thrown the rod and reel. And he started reeling it in real slow. He'd get tangled up occasionally on some undergrowth on the bottom of the lake, and he finally snagged onto something and brought it in, and it was her fishing rod. It had a really nice fishing reel on it, and he had hooked it expertly with one of the treble hook barbs going through one of the little outlets on the rod, the eyelets on the rod that the line goes through. So he couldn't have hooked it any better than that if he had been able to see it. He brought it in, laid it in the bottom of the boat, and we continued fishing for the rest of the day, caught some fish, went home, and the next night, I think, or maybe the night after that, he was downstairs in his workshop taking that reel completely apart, dried it all out, re-oiled everything, put grease on the gears and all that, and it turned out to be a really nice, I think it was a Garcia AbuMatic fishing reel, and he used it for years after that, and that's my fishing story. Hello my YouTube friends, and welcome to another episode of Magnum Videos. If you remember, in the last video I told you that I was going to tell you a fishing story. Well, this is the video that I'm going to tell you the fishing story. So stay right there, sit back. Hello. Hello my friends, welcome to another episode of Magnum Videos. If you remember, last time I told you I was going to tell you a fishing story in a future video. This is the future video that I'm going to tell you the fishing story. Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Magnum Videos. If you remember, in the last video I told you that I was going to tell you a fishing story. Well, this is the video that's going to tell you the fishing story. Oh, shit. Hello friends. Remember in the last video I told you that in a future video I was going to tell you a fishing story? Well, this is the future video. So sit back, relax, watch the next few seconds, and I'll be back right after it's over. Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Magnum Videos. If you remember, in the last video I mentioned that I was going to tell you a fishing story in a future video. Well, this is the future video. So sit back, relax, watch the next few seconds, and I'll be back right after it's over. Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Magnum Videos. If you recall, in the previous video I mentioned that I was going to tell you a fishing story in a future video. Well, this is the future video. So sit back and relax, and I'll be back right after this. So I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment if you'd like. Don't forget to subscribe down there. Click the bell so you'll get notified when I upload the video about the monkey and the three drunks and their accident that they had. And until I speak with you again, and even after that, you stay focused.